Obscure Characters Month is coming. Get ready for quick-fire episodes about lesser-known and cult-favourite bots, weekly, every Saturday in December. To celebrate 250 episodes of the basics, I'm winding the clock back over 7 years to update one of my earliest character spotlight videos. These are the updated basics on the Autobots' greatest soldier, Ultra Magnus. The toy that would become the original Ultra Magnus was first released in the Japanese toy line Diaclone in late 1984 under the name Powered Convoy, and was imported to become part of the Transformers toy line in 1986. The figure transformed into a car carrier, large enough to carry other Autobot toys. The vehicle's cab was a white recolor of Optimus Prime, transforming into its own small robot mode, while the carrier trailer converted into a suit of armor for the robot to wear. However, the idea of Magnus being a small robot wearing armor wasn't featured in any classic media, which treated his armored form as his one and only robot mode. The character of Ultra Magnus was specifically created for 1986's The Transformers the Movie. He was characterized as the consummate soldier, courageous, highly skilled, and always ready to sacrifice himself for others, who preferred following orders to giving them. Now, it's not totally clear if Hasbro always intended to import Powered Convoy to become Ultra Magnus, or if this was a decision made sometime after the character was created. But what is clear is that the earliest draft of the film's script was definitely written without any knowledge of the toy, which resulted in movie concept artist Floro Dery creating an original design for Magnus. Though unused, this design would later be reworked for the cartoon episode War Dawn to create Orion Pax, the young incarnation of Optimus Prime. Ultra Magnus made his media debut a few months ahead of the movie's release, in the Japanese original direct-to-video special, Scramble City. This cartoon, and its tie-in manga, established that Magnus was an old friend of Optimus Prime's, to whom he was like a brother, who had arrived on Earth to coordinate the construction of an Autobot city on the planet. The movie then introduced Magnus to Western audiences as the commander of this completed city, but the film would soon see him take on a new role when the dying Optimus Prime chose Magnus to succeed him as leader of the Autobots, and passed the matrix of leadership to him. Though reluctant to take on the role, Magnus bravely led the Autobots against the threat of the monster planet Unicron. But it turned out leadership wasn't his destiny, when the Matrix itself instead chose the young Autobot Hot Rod to be its bearer, transforming him by its power into Rodimus Prime. Magnus was voiced in the film by celebrity performer Robert Stack.
I'm just a soldier. I'm not worthy.
But the role was taken over by series regular Jack Angel for the subsequent third season of the Transformers cartoon, in which Magnus served as Rodimus Prime's second-in-command and advisor, helping the inexperienced young leader deal with the struggles of his new position.
I know you're bored, Rodimus, but with the mantle of leadership come obligations.
Magnus appeared in nearly every episode of the season, with notable adventures including a team-up with the Decepticon Cyclonus to escape one of the alien Quintessons who had captured them for study, a battle over the sonic weaponry of the planet Eurythma, and having his mind briefly transferred into a synthetic human form. The continued availability of Magnus's toy in 1987 ensured he remained a presence in the cartoon right up to its final episode, and he would continue to feature in the Japanese original sequel series, The Headmasters, which restored him to his original role of Autobot City Commander. But the discontinuation of his toy in 1988 then led to him being killed off late in the series, slain in battle by his new opposite number, the Decepticon City Commander, Sixshot. However, he would be brought back to life many years later in new manga stories published in the 21st century. Ultra Magnus didn't appear in the Marvel Transformers comic book published in America, but he did feature in stories written exclusively for the British version of the series. Introduced into the comic as part of a tie-in with the UK release of the movie, Magnus was the Autobots' greatest warrior, created to spearhead a dangerous mission for the commando unit, the Wreckers. However, for all his strength and power, he proved no match for Galvatron, a time-traveling Decepticon from the future, who defeated Magnus in a one-on-one slugfest that would be remembered as one of the comic's greatest battles. Magnus spent many of his subsequent comic adventures fighting to overcome the guilt he felt for this failure, as Galvatron returned to haunt him again and again. And while Magnus would eventually regain his confidence, in all their rematches, he was never able to achieve a definitive final victory over the invincible future Decepticon. However, over 20 years later, the sequel series, Regeneration 1, at last gave Magnus the triumphant final showdown with Galvatron that the original comic had been unable to deliver. After the end of the original series, Ultra Magnus wasn't seen again until a new incarnation of the character was introduced in 2001's Robots in Disguise. Now, this Magnus was conceived in Japan as a new character inspired by the original, named God Magnus, but he was reimagined as a version of Ultra Magnus for the English language version of the series. Where the Scramble City manga had only suggested a figurative sibling relationship, Robots in Disguise Magnus was the actual brother of his series version of Optimus Prime. A bitter, hot-tempered Autobot who resented the fact that Optimus had been chosen to be leader instead of him. As seen in the Robots in Disguise cartoon, he tried to forcibly take leadership by stealing the Matrix from Optimus, but the attempt led to the brothers discovering that they could share its power by combining into the mighty Omega Prime. You can learn more about the unique history of this version of Magnus in The Basics on Omega Prime. But easily his most lasting influence was inspiring some subsequent series to also depict their versions of Ultra Magnus and Optimus Prime as brothers. First and most notably, Dreamwave Productions' 2003 comic book, War and Peace, which emphasized their sibling relationship by being the first media to depict Magnus like his original toy, as a white duplicate of Optimus wearing armor. This brotherly connection also tied into an old fan theory. You see, in the original cartoon, Orion Pax was rebuilt into Optimus Prime by the old Autobot Alpha Trion. And back in the 90s, fans had come up with the theory that maybe Ultra Magnus had been rebuilt from Orion's best friend, Dion. Working on the premise that the pair both being built by Alpha Trion would make them brothers of a sort, both Robots in Disguise and Dreamwave made teasing references to this theory, which in later years would be expanded on in stories from the Transformers Collectors Club. Check out The Basics on Dion for a more detailed look at the story and the possible origins of Ultra Magnus. Dreamwave's pioneering use of Magnus's inner robot mode sparked a wave of new armorless Magnus toys, made by recoloring existing Optimus figures in white. And for most of the early to mid-2000s, these were the only new Magnus toys available, aside from a Transformers Energon version of the character in 2004. He was a recolor of Autobot weapons platform Overload from Transformers Armada, whose design had been partially inspired by the original Magnus in the first place. White Optimus recolors are still being made today, but towards the end of the 2000s, new figures inspired by Magnus's original armoured form would also start to be produced, with one of the first arriving in the Transformers animated line in 2008. Voiced in the animated cartoon by actor Jeff Bennett, doing an impression of Robert Stack, this series version of Magnus wasn't Optimus's subordinate or sibling, but rather the supreme leader of all Autobots, who transformed into an assault carrier. In the course of the series, he was gravely wounded by the Decepticon spy, Shockwave, but the series was cancelled before Magnus could succumb to his injuries. The symbol of his office was the Magnus hammer, a hugely powerful weather-controlling war hammer, which inspired several subsequent incarnations of the character to also wield hammers as a signature weapon. The latter half of the 2000s also saw Magnus join the world of IDW Publishing's comic books, beginning with his own self-titled Spotlight one-shot in 2006. Designed to be a direct contrast to the uncertain character of the original movie and comic, IDW's Magnus was utterly unwavering, dedicated to his duty as a lawman, travelling the galaxy ensuring Cybertronian technology didn't fall into alien hands. In later years, Magnus became a main cast member in IDW's More Than Meets the Eye, which followed his struggle to relax his strict, uncompromising bureaucratic attitude after the end of the war. This series put a brand new spin on the classic idea of Magnus being a smaller robot within armour, when it revealed that the original Magnus had actually died long ago. Multiple different robots had worn his armour and assumed his identity down through the years to keep his legend alive. And the Magnus who had been appearing in IDW's stories was really a tiny Autobot named Minimus Ambus. A toy of IDW's Magnus, complete with a Minimus inner robot that sat in a cockpit in his chest, was released in 2015's Combiner Wars. IDW's take on the character would notably influence Ultra Magnus's depiction in the Aligned continuity, a multimedia project of interconnected series and stories that launched in 2010. Magnus appeared in many of the novels, comics, video games, and toy lines that made up this continuity, but was most prominently featured in Transformers Prime, when he joined the main cast of the cartoon for its third season in 2013. Similar to the IDW character, this Magnus was a stern, humorless, by-the-book Autobot. He had been one of Optimus Prime's key lieutenants in the war on Cybertron, and had served as leader of the Wreckers during the conflict. When he arrived to join Prime's forces on Earth, his rigid militaristic command style aggravated the other Autobots, especially former Wrecker Wheeljack, but Magnus would soften over time, as he realized that Team Prime saw each other as family rather than soldiers. This Magnus was one of the aforementioned hammer wielders, using the ancient artifact, the Forge of Solus Prime, as his personal weapon. Ultra Magnus has enjoyed many other toys and media appearances over the years. Some other notable examples have included a Beast Wars incarnation of him named Ultra Mammoth, and an evil version of the character from the mirror universe of Shattered Glass. A particular milestone was 2019's Siege, which featured the first Magnus toy since the original to fully recreate the original concept of the character as a white duplicate of Optimus Prime wearing armour formed from his trailer. This was a Cybertronian version of Magnus, whose vehicle mode took inspiration from the Robots in Disguise character, but the figure was later retooled into a classically inspired Earth mode for the 2021 sequel series, Kingdom. This toy earned Magnus a prominent role in Netflix's tie-in cartoon. In this series, Magnus served under Optimus Prime as Autobot military commander, formulating battle plans with the help of an archive of knowledge and wisdom bequeathed to him by his and Optimus's mentor, Alpha Trion. But Magnus feared that Autobot defeat in the war was inevitable, and frustrated that Optimus couldn't see it, he decided to surrender himself to the Decepticons in hopes he could convince Megatron to agree to a ceasefire, only for Megatron to instead execute Magnus when he wouldn't give up the location of the Autobot base. Magnus would also appear with his Siege design in IDW's comics, after the company rebooted their series in 2019 in conjunction with the new toy line, introducing a new universe. Here, Magnus starred in a spotlight storyline in the Transformers Galaxies series, which followed him on a deep space mission searching alien worlds for the missing Alpha Trion. Most recently, a new toy of Magnus based directly on his appearance in the original movie and cartoon with no inner robot was released in the Studio Series line in 2023. And in 2024, he's really been put through the ringer in the new comic series from Skybound, in which he was left traumatized after being captured by the Decepticons during the war on Cybertron and tortured for centuries. From great highs to humbling lows, Ultra Magnus has seen it all, and through it all, he perseveres, with the consistent bravery, strength, and nobility that makes him one of Cybertron's greatest warriors. And those are the updated basics on Ultra Magnus. Tell me your favourite interpretation of him in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe for more, and click the bell to be notified about future episodes, because you don't want to miss my next one, kicking off Obscure Characters Month 2024.